Several years ago, my wife and daughter gave me a Bird Buddy camera for Christmas. Basically, just a regular plastic bird feeder with a small HD camera. When a bird lands on the perch to eat, it triggers a motion sensor. The camera snaps a photo and a video and then sends them to the app on your phone. Before long, the usual birds started coming around. Cardinals, finches, chickadees. I was the one who really got into it. I spent my free time watching the videos and looking through the hundreds of photos that it was taking, noticing the small things that you would miss from afar. After a while, I got the idea that it might be fun to take some of these videos and start a little YouTube channel with my daughter. I mentioned it to her and she was interested, or at least as interested as an 11-year-old gets. She said she'd give it a try, so I set up the app on her phone, showed her what to look for, and I asked her to help download new clips at night. We called the channel Feeder and Flock. It's still out there on YouTube. Just birds, a feeder, a backyard. Then, almost without realizing it, I started turning the experience into something else. I added more cameras. I started editing and uploading the clips, and of course, at first, it really was just for fun. The raccoon always showed up at night when I forgot to bring the thing in. By the way, I ended up on the wrong side of a raccoon once, and they really do hold a grudge. But it was nothing serious. Before long, I noticed that I was logging in just to check the numbers. How many people watched that day? Why did one clip do better than another? Was there something I could do to make someone stop and watch instead of moving on? Did we need a logo? Should I post at certain times or try to figure out what the system wanted? I started looking for approval. I started thinking about what I should be doing next, which even included at least one Google sheet. One afternoon, I finally saw what I was doing. We started out just watching the birds. Somewhere along the way, the videos in the channel started to take up more space than the birds themselves. I was treating my own backyard like it was a studio. The moment itself was starting to matter less than this abstract idea of an audience that I had in my head. I was no longer only looking at a living creature. I was looking at a possible post, a possible reaction, a possible metric on a dashboard. What bothered me most was looking at Caroline. She had been interested, sure, but I was the one who took it too far. I was the one pushing it along. I wanted us to have something to do together, but I ended up pulling my own daughter into the exact same world of constant sharing and public visibility that I was hoping to keep her away from. And that really stuck with me, not because sharing a video of a blue jay is some terrible moral failure. People share beautiful, ordinary things on the internet every day, and that can be generous and really even therapeutic. What surprised me was how quickly my own mind started to change. I could feel the real experience turning into raw material, and I know better. Still, right there in my own backyard, I was doing it. And to be fair, this impulse isn't entirely new. Previous generations documented their lives too. I remember sitting through slide reels of vacations my grandparents had taken. The lights would go down in the living room downstairs, the projector would drone, and there we would all be, bored stiff, watching one picture after another of mountains in Colorado or their trip to Europe, snapshots with someone half out of frame and people standing beside cars that they didn't even own anymore. So no, we did not invent the desire to preserve our experiences or share them with other people. We saw our parents and grandparents doing some version of that long before phones were in our pockets. But something fundamental changes when the physical friction disappears, when the camera is always with us, when the audience is no longer a few relatives in a dark living room, but potentially anyone on Earth, when the delay between living a moment and displaying it collapses almost to nothing. We may be doing a time-honored human thing, but now we do it at a speed and a scale that transforms it into something else entirely. A few years ago, I had the privilege of working for a local photographer who made serious and beautiful work. He used to say he was not really interested in documenting things, at least not in the flat sense. He wasn't trying to prove that a tree had been there, or a mountain, or an elk, or water running over rocks. He was trying to capture what he felt in the presence of those things. That was the difference. The photograph wasn't meant to be evidence. It was an encounter. I think about that distinction a lot now because many of us share pieces of our lives as though we're sharing something deeply personal. And sometimes we are. But sometimes I wonder if we are only sharing the record of a moment we barely allowed ourselves to inhabit in the first place. We sometimes think we're sharing our soul, but the soul of the thing was in the attention we gave it before we reached for the camera. If we lose the ability to be fully present in the moment, then the things we share may still be beautiful, it may be impressive, and it may still get a response. But it does not carry very much of us, the person, with it. That was when I realized that this project, human scale, wasn't really going to be about technology, at least not underneath. The birds, the art, even my own time with my daughter had started to feel like something to keep track of instead of something to live, to appreciate, to enjoy, and it made me wonder what happens to a person when more and more ordinary life gets turned outward for display. The trouble isn't only that we use these devices, it's that we start to look at the world through them. And again, none of those impulses is automatically bad. The harder question for me is whether we still possess the capacity to experience reality fully before we begin preparing it for someone else. That question has stayed with me as a father because I keep looking at the world our children are inheriting. An environment where almost anything can be converted into content, not just family vacations or milestone birthdays. Anything. Earlier generations certainly had their own problems. Childhood was never a perfect paradise. But historically, there was significant physical friction between an experience and an audience. If you did something silly or, frankly, stupid, it usually stayed exactly where it happened. You could be interested in something weird without needing to turn it into a public brand or an identity marker. You could go through your formative phases and leave fewer permanent artifacts behind. You were allowed to become yourself more slowly. Now, almost every part of growing up seems to carry a quiet background question. Should this be saved? Should this be shared? Should this become part of the portrayal of me that other people are seeing? Man, that's a lot to ask of a child, and it's a lot to ask of anyone. Not every part of life is better with an audience. Some things are meant to happen without being turned into proof. A bird sitting on a feeder does not need to become anything. It already is enough. Sometimes the most human-scale thing we can do is to let it stay right there. That habit of turning real life into material doesn't stay in the backyard. It spreads. It slips into our friendships, our parenting, our hobbies, our grief, and the way we understand our own minds. We start asking the wrong questions. How did it look? Did anyone notice? Was it worth sharing? Did it get a reaction? And those questions gradually crowd out the only ones that matter. Was I actually present? Was I kind? Did I let the moment be itself? This is why a hammer doesn't make you a carpenter and a typewriter doesn't make you a writer. Tools can help us work, but they cannot decide what is worth caring about. That has to come from somewhere else. The trouble starts when the tool quietly teaches us to see the whole world as something to collect, when our first thought is no longer to live a moment but to save it. And if that can happen to me, standing in my own yard with my daughter, then I think it's worth looking closely at the conditions our children are absorbing. What does it do to a young person when their hobbies become profiles, their friendships become evidence, and their mistakes become searchable forever? I don't know the full answer, but I do know we need some part of our life that does not ask us to perform. Not everything private is secretive, not everything unshared is wasted, and not everything undocumented is lost. Now, that last point is incredibly hard for me to admit. I'm someone who documents things. I'm currently working on a project archiving ordinary life in this region. Field recordings, screenshots of local websites, dash cam footage, ADS-B, aircraft traffic, weather, daily notes, all of it eventually preserved publicly online. And I do this because I deeply believe everyday reality, everyday life matters. And it disappears faster than we realize. I'm creating a time capsule of sorts of this place for someone 100 years from now. On the other side of the spectrum, I've certainly fallen prey to the oversharing trap on social media at times in my life as well. So I'm not standing outside this problem with clean hands, I'm right in the thick of it. And there is a tension here that I haven't fully resolved. Sometimes preservation is an act of deep love. Sometimes documentation is a form of local stewardship. But sometimes recording becomes a way of stepping slightly outside the room while life is still happening. Sometimes preservation becomes an attempt at possession. Sometimes wonder becomes inventory. And that's the fine line that I am trying to learn how to see. After I realized what was happening with the bird videos, I stopped treating the feeder like a channel. We stopped updating the page, the birds still came, the raccoons still held a grudge. But the good news is we eventually worked it out. Nothing important was lost. In fact, something important came back. The birds became birds again. Not material, not clips, not proof of anything, just birds. And every now and then when one lands on the porch railing outside our kitchen window, I try to let the moment stay precisely where it is. No audience, no pointing it out, no measurement, no mental calculation about whether anyone else on earth would care. Just one living creature on the other side of the window pane, and me trying to remember how to look. And maybe that's the small practice I'm trying to learn myself, just choosing once in a while not to convert the moment. Let something be beautiful without needing it to be useful. Let something be strange without making it something to share. Let something be entirely yours without turning it into something for everyone else. The next time something catches your attention this week, try pausing for 3 seconds before reaching into your pocket. Not always, just sometimes. Let the first encounter belong only to the encounter. Let the bird be a bird. If you'd like to read more about this, I've written a companion essay over on Substack. That's where I let these ideas stretch out a bit more than I can right here. If you're interested, you can find it at The Human Scale Companion on Substack. Check the show notes or visit humanscalecompanion.substack.com. I hope this episode helped you slow down long enough to notice your own life. And if you know someone who might appreciate this kind of conversation, I hope you'll share it with them. It's a conversation worth having. I'm William Cardy. Thanks for being here. I'll see you next time.